My husband cheated on me twice, and I forgave him twice. So when he kissed my forehead outside O'Hare, told me his 3-week Singapore Leadership Summit was the last sacrifice we needed before starting our family, and asked me to be patient with his mother while he was away, I smiled, fixed his tie, and watched him leave. Then I waited exactly 11 minutes, called my banker, froze every joint card he had access to, forwarded a folder labeled third time to my attorney, and changed the security code on the townhouse he had been using to hide another woman in plain sight. By then, I was no longer a forgiving wife. I was a woman finishing a plan. If anyone had looked at us that morning, they would have seen the kind of couple magazines pretend still exists in expensive cities. Cole in his charcoal brioni suit, leather weekender in one hand, espresso in the other. Me in cream silk, hair pinned back, standing beneath the awning of our Gold Coast townhouse while September wind skimmed down the street from Lake Michigan. Our black Range Rover idled by the curb. The doorman from next door tipped his hat. A florist wheeled hydrangeas into the brownstone across the lane. Chicago looked polished and cold and expensive, the way it always does when money is trying too hard not to look frightened. Cole pulled me into his chest and sighed like a man carrying the burden of the world. When I get back, he said, everything changes. The Wilcox deal closes, the bonus clears, and we stop living like we're waiting for life to begin. He knew exactly which words to use. Waiting for life to begin. He had fed me some version of that sentence for years. After the first affair, it had been we're still healing. After the second, it had been we're rebuilding. By the third, he had upgraded the lie into a future tense so sleek it almost sounded like faith. Behind me, from inside the house, I could already hear his mother's voice sailing down the front hall. Lorraine Shaw never spoke so much as staged declarations. She had arrived the previous evening with 4 Louis Vuitton cases, a mink-trimmed cape, 2 humidifiers, a silver pill organizer the size of a jewelry box, and the assumption that my home would function like a private hotel. Cole had explained that her condo in Naples was being fumigated after some water issue, and that she would only stay a few weeks. Only. He said it the way liars say relax. I watched him slide into the SUV. He lowered the window. Don't stress yourself while I'm gone. Mom gets anxious when routines change. I smiled. Of course. What I wanted to say was that I was no longer stressed by him leaving. I was only interested in where he was really going. The driver pulled away. I stood still until the taillights disappeared at the corner. Then I went back inside, shut the brass and glass front door behind me, and let my face go blank. Lorraine sat in my breakfast room as if she had been painted into it, one jeweled hand around a bone china cup, the other flicking through a catalog for custom drapery. Her pearl lipstick had already marked the rim. My father-in-law, Harold, was in the family room criticizing the stock market loud enough for the television to hear him. They did not ask whether Cole had made good time to the airport. They only asked what the cook was preparing for lunch, though we did not have a cook. Adrian, Lorraine said, not looking up, your lilies in the foyer are dying. It sets a depressing tone. I'll survive the tone, I said. That got her eyes on me. In the old days, I would have softened it, smiled, smoothed the moment over for peace. But peace is expensive when you are the only one paying for it. I went upstairs to my dressing room, closed the door, and took the leather folio from the back of my bottom drawer. Third time was stamped across the tab in black ink. Inside were copies of wire transfers, hotel confirmations, screenshots, a private investigator's timeline, a draft motion from my attorney, and one glossy photograph of my husband with his hand at the back of a 26-year-old woman in a white bikini on a terrace in St. Bart's. He was supposed to be flying to Singapore. Instead, he had booked an oceanfront villa called Maison Celeste under the name C. Shaw Consulting. The woman in the photo was named Sloane Mercer, a travel influencer whose online brand depended on airy captions about feminine softness and men who felt safe. The first time Cole cheated, I had believed in apologies. The second time, I had believed in conditions. By the third, I believed only in preparation. That was the difference between the woman waving goodbye under the awning and the woman standing in front of the folio now. One of them still hoped love could outreason betrayal. The other knew betrayal only respected consequences. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls in under 6 minutes. First to Elise Moreno, my attorney. "He's on the move," I said. "Trigger everything." Second to Noah in private banking. "Freeze the joint cards, revoke his authorized access, and move the household reserve into the individual trust account we discussed." Third to building security. "Effective immediately, no guest access without my written approval. No exceptions. Not even family." Then I opened my messages and found the florist order Cole had hidden badly enough for me to discover it 2 nights earlier. White orchids. Garden roses. A handwritten card, for our real beginning. I changed the delivery address from Maison Celeste's villa manager to Elise Moreno's office. Some people think revenge begins when you raise your voice. They are wrong. Revenge begins when you become difficult to surprise. 7 years earlier, when I married Cole Shaw at the Drake under chandeliers so heavy they looked like captured constellations, everyone told me I was lucky. He was handsome in that polished Midwestern way that photographs well and ages slowly. He had a developer's instinct for charm, which is to say he could look at a room full of people and immediately understand what each of them needed to hear in order to call him exceptional. My father liked that he shook hands firmly and remembered names. My mother liked that he sent gardenias after dinner parties. I liked that he made me laugh in elevators and sent me articles at 2 in the morning because he knew exactly which paragraph would make me call him before sunrise. At the time, I was a crisis management attorney at a national firm, spending my life cleaning up disasters rich men swore they had not caused. Cole felt different from my clients. He spoke fast, dreamed big, kissed me like he meant it. He said he loved how sharp I was, how I never flinched, how I made him feel as if his life could become something more refined by standing next to mine. When he proposed, he did it on the terrace at Gibson's Italia with the river throwing silver back at the night. I said yes without hesitation, and for a while, I was embarrassingly happy. The first 2 years were easy in the way only early lies can be. We traveled. We bought the townhouse. We hosted Christmas Eve. We argued about ordinary married things like whether the den needed built-ins and whose turn it was to call the plumber. We acted like a team. When my father died unexpectedly after a stroke, Cole held me together through the funeral, the probate paperwork, the numb weeks afterward when grief sat on my chest like wet cement. That is what made the first betrayal so cruel. It arrived disguised as comfort. Her name was Brielle. 24. Junior acquisitions associate at Cole's firm. Honey blonde hair, breathy laugh, calves toned by Pilates and ambition. I found out by accident, which is how humiliations usually prefer to travel. Cole had left his navy cashmere coat on the banquette after a dinner with clients. I picked it up to hang it, and a lipstick tube rolled from the inside pocket onto the floor. It was the wrong shade for me, a glossy coral I would never wear. At first, I thought nothing dramatic. Maybe someone had set her bag down. Maybe it had gotten mixed up. Maybe. Then I twisted the tube and saw the initials engraved on the cap. Boy. When I asked him, he didn't even deny it long enough to be creative. He sat at the kitchen island, both hands flat on the marble, and broke apart in under 90 seconds. He said it had happened twice. He said he had been stupid, lonely, drunk after a closing dinner. He said watching me drown in grief had made him feel helpless and he had reached for the nearest thing that made him feel admired. He cried so hard his shoulders shook. He said he hated himself. He said he would resign if I asked. He said it meant nothing. Nothing is the favorite word of men asking forgiveness for something they wanted very much while they were doing it. I should have left then. Today I know that. At the time, I was 33, exhausted, fatherless, and still addicted to the version of my husband I thought I had married. I did what women raised to preserve beautiful things often do. I mistook repair for virtue. We went to therapy in an office that smelled faintly of bergamot and old books. Cole read from journals. He wrote me letters. He deleted Brielle's number in front of me, switched firms within the year, and spent 6 months behaving like a man auditioning for redemption. Flowers on Fridays. Lunches sent to my office. A weekend in Quebec because I once mentioned wanting snow and quiet. He learned the language of accountability with impressive speed. Looking back, I realized that was the first sign of how dangerous he was. Truly remorseful people change slowly because change costs them something. Cole changed fast because performance came naturally. Still, life resumed. We hosted again. We laughed again. My mother began using words like stronger. I started believing the wound had become a scar and that scars, while ugly, proved survival. But betrayal has a smell to it once you know it. Not literally. Something subtler. A wrong pause in conversation. A brightness too polished. Gratitude that sounds rehearsed. 2 years after Brielle, when Cole's phone buzzed at 11:30 on a Sunday night and he turned it face down before reading it, my body knew the truth before my mind would let itself pronounce it. The second woman was named Monica Ruiz, and unlike Brielle, she was not young enough to be mistaken for a momentary lapse. She was 38, divorced, elegant, and taught at a private training studio in River North where Cole had supposedly been rehabbing an old tennis injury. I found the proof in a garment bag. He had told me he was flying to Denver for a municipal zoning conference. Instead, he had booked 2 nights at the Little Nell in Aspen under his middle name. I discovered the invoice tucked inside the pocket of the tuxedo bag after it came back from pressing. Room service for 2. Spa charges. A bottle of Krug. The dates overlapped with our IVF consultation. There are shocks that shatter you and shocks that cool you. The first affair had broken me. The second made me still. When I laid the invoice in front of him, he went pale in a way I can only describe as insulted by exposure. Then the tears came again, but weaker this time, because repetition thins sincerity. He said he had panicked about fatherhood. He said he felt old. He said Monica made him feel seen. He said he had ended it already. Then he knelt on the floor of our dressing room, pressed his forehead to my waist, and asked me not to throw our lives away over the worst decision of his life. The worst decision of his life. Singular. Men like Cole always narrate patterns as accidents. I did not forgive the second affair because I believed him. I forgave it because by then I understood 2 things at once. First, I had married a man with an appetite for admiration so bottomless it would eventually consume whatever mercy I fed it. Second, impulsive exits are for people who have nothing to protect. I had my name on property, investments braided into his ventures, staff who answered to both of us, and a mother whose blood pressure spiked every time life gave her a new reason to fear. Leaving was no longer just emotional. It was operational. And operations are my specialty. So I sat very still on the velvet bench in our dressing room while Cole begged, and I listened harder than he realized. He offered everything before I even asked. Full transparency. Couples counseling. Password access. A postnuptial agreement if that would help me feel safe. Safe. I nearly laughed. Safety was no longer a feeling available to me in that marriage. But leverage was. By morning, I had made my decision. I told him I would stay under conditions. The conditions were not spontaneous. They were precise, lawyered, and deliberately structured to look more forgiving than they were. Elise Moreno drafted the postnup. It included a fidelity clause strong enough to break bone. Any future adultery accompanied by dissipation of marital assets would trigger immediate redistribution terms in my favor, fee shifting, and exclusive occupancy rights to the primary residence pending litigation. Cole signed without meaningful negotiation because cheaters prefer documents in moments of shame. They assume emotion is their punishment and paperwork is just scenery. That was step 1. Step 2 happened quietly over the next 11 months. I moved my inheritance from my father, which had once sat adjacent to our broader investment strategy, into a separate trust managed solely under my authority. I restructured household reserves. I stopped using our joint Amex for personal expenses. I documented every contribution to the townhouse, every payment toward renovations, every transfer into Cole's development holding company that had originated from marital funds. I created a spreadsheet with tabs so meticulous a forensic accountant could have used it as a devotional text. Step 3 was psychological. I stopped confronting suspicious behavior in real time. If Cole came home with lies clinging to him like cologne, I let them settle. I watched. I learned his rhythms. When he was faithful, he was easy. When he was straying, he became theatrical. Too attentive. Too available. Too eager to narrate his location unprompted. He would text from meetings before I even wondered where he was. He would over-explain delays. He would kiss my temple in passing the way careless men tap an amulet, as if affection could ward off evidence. For almost a year, he behaved. Or appeared to. We took a trip to Provence. We hosted a fundraiser for the children's wing at Northwestern Memorial. He attended therapy just often enough to claim he still believed in it. He learned how to say words like repair and accountability with his mouth while living in open negotiations with his impulses somewhere deeper. I did not trust him, but life regained a surface smooth enough to pass inspection. That is the danger. Humans are not built to remain at full alarm forever. Even betrayal fatigue eventually dozes. Then came Sloane Mercer. I saw her first on a rooftop in June, though I did not know her name yet. Cole and I were at the reopening party for a restored Art Deco hotel off Michigan Avenue, all black lacquer and champagne towers and people pretending not to scan each other's wrists for watch brands. I had been speaking with a hospital board member about donor compliance when I turned and caught Cole across the terrace, half hidden by a stand of olive trees and hammered brass planters. He was leaning in toward a young woman in a backless white dress, smiling with the kind of unguarded brightness he no longer used on me unless guests were present. She touched his sleeve. He touched the small of her back. Neither movement was dramatic enough to be scandalous. Together, they were intimate in the way a lock turning is intimate. Quiet. Final. When he saw me notice them, he came over at once. Too fast. The woman vanished into the crowd. Potential branding consultant, he said before I had asked anything. For the Wilcox Resort pitch. Social reach. You know how these clients are. Of course, I said. That night, while he slept beside me, I found her on Instagram. Sloane Mercer. 26. Charleston by birth, Manhattan by aspiration, the sort of woman whose life online existed in a permanent golden hour. Linen sets. Spa robes. Terrazzo bathrooms. Yacht rails. Captions about softness, standards, and choosing the life that chooses you back. Cole did not follow her publicly, but 3 of his junior project managers did. That was enough to tell me she was not random. I did not confront him. Instead, I called Mara Chen, the private investigator Elise sometimes used for high-asset divorces and internal executive matters. Mara was discreet, expensive, and infuriatingly patient. The kind of woman who never wore color and missed nothing. I'm not asking whether he's cheating, I told her over coffee at RL the next morning. I'm asking how long. She gave me a look that almost qualified as sympathy. That's usually the right question. Within 10 days, she had the outline. Sloane wasn't a branding consultant. She was the beneficiary of increasingly creative generosity. Hotel bookings routed through project accounts. Jewelry purchases hidden as client gifts. Weekend charters labeled site inspections. 2 rent payments on a furnished condo in Tribeca leased through an LLC tied indirectly to Cole's development group. The affair had likely begun 4 months earlier. The money movement had begun sooner. When Mara said that last part, something inside me settled with terrifying calm. Adultery I expected. Theft interested me more. Men like Cole rarely understand that cheating humiliates a wife, but financial concealment enrages a lawyer. I asked Mara for everything. Dates, receipts, photographs, flight manifests, shell entities, car service logs, screenshots, restaurant bookings, villa deposits. I wanted the affair not as rumor but as architecture. I wanted load-bearing proof. 3 weeks later, while Cole stood in our kitchen telling his mother she could stay with us during his Singapore trip because Adrian is a saint, I already knew he had never intended to board that plane. I also knew exactly which island he preferred when he wanted to feel invisible. He thought I had forgiven him twice. What he did not understand was that forgiveness and preparation can wear the same face right up until the trap closes. The evening before his departure, our townhouse looked like a magazine spread about inherited money and excellent lighting. The front parlor lamps cast honey over the walnut floors. The dining room smelled of rosemary, veal stock, and the fig tart my housekeeper had left for dessert before going home. Cole insisted we keep only day staff, because full-time live-in employees made him feel like a caricature of wealth, though he never objected to the labor itself so long as a woman near him absorbed it. Lorraine arrived just before 6 wearing a camel wrap coat despite the mild weather, followed by Harold and a driver dragging in enough luggage for a European court in exile. If Cole had been a better actor, he would have looked nervous. Instead, he looked euphoric. That was his flaw in the third affair. Not sloppiness. Excess confidence. He had cheated before and survived before, and like all gamblers mistakenly paid out by fate, he began to believe he possessed a system rather than luck. At dinner, he raised his Barolo and told the story he had rehearsed. International Leadership Summit. Investors from Singapore and Dubai. 3 weeks of private meetings. Potential 8-figure upside if the Wilcox Resort portfolio landed in his firm's hands. Lorraine clasped her hands under her chin as if he had announced sainthood. Harold grunted his approval and asked whether Asian buyers still valued brick over glass. I watched Cole perform sincerity between bites of osso buco and understood exactly why so many people trusted him. He never told small lies like a guilty man. He told large lies like a visionary. And while he's away, Lorraine said, angling her fork at me like a lecturing wand, I expect this house to maintain standards. Harold's sodium stays low. I need breakfast no later than 8:30, and I refuse to drink that pod coffee from the machine upstairs. Cole flashed me the smile he reserved for moments when he wanted my obedience to look like affection. You're an angel for doing this. I dabbed my mouth with linen. I'm sure we'll all adapt. Across the table, his eyes narrowed a fraction. He had expected warmer. Men who rely on emotional manipulation feel temperature changes the way sharks feel blood. Later, after Lorraine retired to the guest suite and Harold went to watch cable news at a punishing volume, Cole found me in the butler's pantry sealing leftovers. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. Thank you, he murmured. For not punishing me forever for things I can't undo. It was a remarkable sentence. He spoke of his own choices as if they were weather events that had merely passed over our marriage. I turned in his arms and studied his face. Beautiful liar. Controlled jaw. Expensive haircut. The little crescent scar by his eyebrow from boarding school hockey. There had been a time when knowing every inch of that face felt like intimacy. By then it felt like threat assessment. Do you love her? I asked softly. He went still. Not startled enough. That told me more than any denial would have. Who? I almost admired the reflex. I smiled and touched his tie. The resort deal. Do you love it enough to risk 3 weeks of your life on it? His body loosened with relief. God, yes. If this lands, we're finally in a different league. We. Another favorite word of thieves. That night he slept quickly, one arm flung over the pillow I no longer shared for comfort, only geography. I stayed awake long enough to hear his phone vibrate once on the nightstand. He reached for it without opening his eyes, checked the screen, and smiled in the dark. Then he turned the device face down again. The same move. The same arrogance. Different woman. At 5:30 the next morning, before his alarm, I slipped from bed and went downstairs in my robe. The kitchen windows were still black. I made espresso and opened the folio one last time at the breakfast table while the house breathed around me. Flight records, no booking to Singapore. Car service, O'Hare drop-off only. Second car from airport long-term parking to private charter terminal in Waukegan. Charter manifest to San Juan, onward transfer to St. Bart's. Villa reservation paid in part from a business account and in part from a card linked to our joint line. Florist order scheduled for island delivery. Jewelry receipt from New York routed through a courier. There were photographs too. One of them showed Sloane on a hotel balcony wearing a gold cuff I had given Cole for our 5th anniversary. When I saw that image the first time, I felt grief briefly. Not for the marriage. For the woman I used to be, the one who would have broken open under it. By 7, Lorraine was downstairs in a silk kaftan complaining the guest towels were too plush to absorb water properly. By 7:30, Harold wanted marmalade we did not buy because he had remembered liking it in London in 1998. By 8, Cole was dressed for a summit he would never attend, kissing cheeks, checking his watch, radiating the restless excitement of a man about to reward himself. At the door, he pulled me close. "When I get back," he said, "let's take a month in Italy. No phones. No distractions. Just us." That is the thing about practiced liars. They always promise simplicity while juggling deceit. I touched his lapel and nodded. "Have a safe flight." He left. The driver loaded his bag. The SUV rolled south toward the expressway. I stood under the awning until my phone buzzed with the security camera alert from the corner. Vehicle departed. Then I went inside and began. Noah froze the cards within minutes. Elise filed the emergency motion package electronically before 9. Mara texted the villa manager's confirmation that the first floral delivery had been rejected because payment failed. I forwarded the message to my private folder and poured myself a second espresso. Upstairs, Lorraine called down for steel-cut oats and berries, as if breakfast still mattered more than the demolition of the fiction her son had been living in. I looked up toward the ceiling and almost laughed. This was what being 3 steps ahead felt like. Not fury. Not triumph. Precision. And precision, unlike forgiveness, had never once failed me. By 10:15, the house had become an absurd theater in which only I knew the final act. Lorraine ate her breakfast in the sunroom and criticized the cut of the strawberries. Harold monopolized the den and shouted at cable pundits as if he were on retainer to defend Western civilization. I answered emails from my office, moved 2 client calls to virtual, and set my laptop on the library desk where I could monitor both the front hall camera and my incoming messages. Every few minutes, some new piece of Cole's fabricated life cracked. At 11:03, Noah sent confirmation that our joint platinum line, the development expense card, and Cole's supplemental travel card had all been suspended pending review requested by the primary account authority. At 11:27, Mara texted that Cole's connecting charter had landed. At noon, Elise emailed the filed petition, the motion to enforce the post-nuptial provisions, and the occupancy request. At 12:40, Sloane Mercer posted a story of ocean water hitting white stone steps with the caption, "Finally exhale." She had tagged no location, but the villa railing matched Mara's photos exactly. I stared at the clip for a long moment. There is a special kind of shamelessness in a woman luxuriating inside another woman's marriage while branding it as wellness. Then I closed the app and returned to work. Lorraine found me in the library at 1 carrying a legal pad. "I've written a few things the house needs while Cole is gone," she said, offering me a list. "The upstairs guest mattress is too firm, the silver in the dining room needs polishing, Harold wants his shirts pressed with more starch, and I think the hydrangeas on the front landing should be changed to white. Purple looks common." I took the pad and glanced at it. She had written 12 items in looping blue ink, all instructions, no questions. "This isn't a hotel," I said. Her face tightened. "Excuse me?" "This isn't a hotel," I repeated. "Staff hours run 9 to 4. After that, if you need something, you'll need to ask politely or do it yourself. Lorraine laughed, short and incredulous. Adrian, really? Don't start this while Cole is away. He worries about you enough. That line would once have pierced me. By then it only sounded stale. Cole should worry about himself. She studied me more carefully. You're in one of your moods. I handed the pad back. And you're in my house. Silence landed between us with real weight for the first time since I had known her. Lorraine's authority had always depended on my willingness to avoid scenes. The moment I stopped subsidizing her comfort with my restraint, she looked strangely smaller, though the diamonds at her ears still flashed like old money trying to hold formation. What exactly is that supposed to mean? She asked. It means, I said evenly, that while your son is away, I suggest everyone here behaves with unusual humility. I left before she could answer. Power rarely needs the last word if timing is good. At 2:13, Cole called. The line came through on WhatsApp instead of regular service, which told me he was already on island Wi-Fi and did not want carrier records aligning too neatly with his fiction. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, baby, he said over a wash of wind and false brightness. Just landed. Longest flight of my life. I swiveled in my chair and looked out at the courtyard fountain. Singapore sounds breezy. A fractional pause. Hotel balcony. Tropical humidity. You know how it is. I'm sure I do. He lowered his voice. Everything okay there? Mom texted me that you seem tense. Of course she had. Enablers are often more loyal to narrative than blood itself. I'm working, I said. You should go enjoy your summit. He laughed. You know me. Straight to meetings. After we hung up, I forwarded the call log to Elise. At 3, another message from Mara arrived, this time with photographs taken from a discreet distance at Gustavia Harbor. Cole in linen trousers, no wedding ring, carrying 2 shopping bags from Cartier. Sloane beside him in oversized sunglasses and a laugh wide enough to be visible from 50 yards. In one frame, he bent to kiss her temple. In another, she held up her wrist so he could fasten something around it. The cuff. My anniversary gift had not been enough, apparently he had upgraded her. I should say I felt devastated then, that the image opened me all over again. It didn't. By the third betrayal, heartbreak had become administrative. The emotional injury mattered, yes, but less than the clarity. Cole did not cheat because our marriage was broken or because I was insufficient or because some wound inside him needed love. He cheated because he liked extraction. Attention, forgiveness, money, reputation, labor. He took from every woman around him and called the taking confusion. By late afternoon, Elise called with the first true piece of good news. Judge granted temporary financial restraints pending hearing, she said. And because of the post-nup language plus the preliminary dissipation evidence, we're in a strong position. Also, your occupancy request has a hearing date moved up. He'll hate that. I'd hate it on his behalf, I said. She laughed softly. I know you would. Then her voice changed. Adrian, one more thing. Our forensic accountant found repeated transfers from Shaw Urban Holdings into an entity called Mercer Social LLC. Not enormous individually. 3,000, 7,000, 12. But across 5 months? $318,000. For a second, everything in the room sharpened. The leather spines on the shelves. The ticking carriage clock. The reflection of my own stillness in the library window. 318? I asked. Yes. I closed my eyes. He used company funds? And commingled marital funds into project reimbursements. It's dirty enough that if his partners look hard, they'll ask questions you won't need to pose. There it was. The true hinge. Affairs humiliate privately. Financial misconduct destroys publicly. When we ended the call, I sat motionless for nearly a full minute. Upstairs, I could hear Lorraine telling someone on speakerphone that she hoped Cole wasn't surrounded by those grasping foreign girls. The irony was so vulgar it almost qualified as comedy. I opened my laptop, created a new folder titled Consequences, and began sorting the evidence in chronological order. By then the Villa flowers had bounced, the cards had frozen, the judge had moved, and the money trail had widened. He thought the third time would look like the first two. He had no idea the third time was already a case. That evening, I hosted my in-laws at dinner as if civilization had not begun to disassemble around them. I ordered roast chicken from Gibson's, had the sides transferred to our own serving platters, uncorked a Chianti Harold Light, and let Lorraine believe good manners meant surrender. There is no point revealing a battlefield to people who will only clutter it. Lorraine took one bite and announced the potatoes had too much garlic. Harold wanted more salt, though his cardiologist had begged otherwise. I served, cleared, and answered only when necessary. Between courses, my phone vibrated steadily against my thigh under the table. Elise with revised filings. Mara with updated photos. Noah with confirmation that attempted charges on Cole's frozen travel card had begun to fail. The first declined transaction was from a boutique in Gustavia. The second was from the villa manager. The third was from a beachfront restaurant where the tasting menu ran $600 a head before wine. I imagined the sequence with startling clarity. Cole reaching for a card, still assuming the world recognized his entitlement. The waiter returning with professional apology. Sloane tilting her head, confused. Cole smiling too quickly, claiming bank security. Even humiliation has choreography. After dinner, I excused myself to the powder room and answered Mara's call. He's scrambling, she said. There was a visible argument outside the restaurant 20 minutes ago. She's annoyed. Only 20 minutes? I asked. That girl has stamina. I smiled despite myself. Keep following. I already am. Also, side note, your husband just called the private jet broker he used in June. He may try to leave earlier than planned. Good. Let him come home to paperwork. When I stepped back into the hall, Lorraine was waiting near the staircase. The sconces threw flattering shadows over her face, but not enough to soften her expression. What is going on with Cole's cards? She asked. So that was it. He had called his mother before his wife, because some men instinctively seek the woman most committed to protecting their innocence. I leaned against the newel post. You'd have to ask Cole. I did. He said there was some absurd banking error and that you were handling it. Why would he say that if it weren't true? Because lying is one of his stronger habits. Her mouth dropped open, then flattened. I will not have you speak about my son that way. Then perhaps your son should stop earning it. Harold appeared in the doorway behind her, remote control in hand like a scepter. Adrian, enough of this sharpness. Cole is working abroad and doesn't need domestic nonsense. I looked from one to the other and understood something important. They really did not know. Not because Cole respected them enough to protect them from the truth, but because people like Lorraine and Harold only accepted information that preserved the version of their son that reflected well on them. In their private mythology, Cole's ambition was brilliance, his appetites were masculine excess, and every woman injured by him was too cold, too demanding, too dramatic to appreciate his pressures. I no longer felt anger toward them. Only fatigue. Cole is not in Singapore, I said. Lorraine laughed immediately. Don't be ridiculous. He's in St. Bart's with a 26-year-old influencer named Sloane Mercer. He has been diverting marital and business funds to support her. His cards are frozen because I froze them. My attorney has filed for divorce. The silence after that was pure and electric. Harold recovered first. That is a filthy lie. It's a documented fact. Lorraine took a step toward me, color rising in her face. You bitter woman. You never deserved him. Ever since your father died, you've been hard, suspicious, impossible to please. If he made one mistake. 3, I said. She blinked. 1 affair is a mistake if you insist on using soft words for selfish acts. 2 is a pattern. 3 is character. Harold pointed at me so violently the remote shook. You're trying to destroy him. No, I said. I'm done protecting him from himself. Lorraine demanded proof. I almost refused on principle, then decided witnesses were useful. I opened my phone and showed her one photograph. Not all of them. Just enough. Cole on the harbor, hand at Sloane's waist, mouth against her hair, expression loose with the intimacy he denied at home. Lorraine stared. Her face did something complicated then, something between injury and denial. She handed the phone back as if it burned. That could be anyone, she whispered. It's your son. He loves you. No, I said quietly. He loves access. Harold lunged for the whiskey decanter on the console and poured himself a drink with trembling hands. He'll fix this when he gets back. I met his eyes. When he gets back, he'll be litigating. That was when Lorraine began to cry, not for me, not even visibly for the collapse of a marriage, but for the embarrassment of being forced to see her son as other people did. She sank onto the stair and pressed her fingers to her temples. I felt nothing triumphant watching her. Enabling someone is its own form of cowardice, but it is still pathetic to see delusion break in real time. I need to call him, she said. You can try. She tried. 5 times. No answer. Then a text. Then another. Then a voicemail thick with disbelief, fury, and maternal pleading. No response. At 9:40, my phone lit with Cole's name. I answered on speaker and set it on the entry table between us. What the hell did you do? He hissed without preamble. Lorraine inhaled sharply. I folded my arms. Hello to you too. My cards are blocked, the villa manager is making scenes, and my mother is saying insane things. Fix this now. I looked at the ceiling for a second, steadying my voice into something almost pleasant. You should have booked Singapore. He swore. Not the polished profanity of boardrooms. The real stuff. The panicked stuff. Behind him I could hear a woman asking, Cole, what is happening? How perfect, I thought. Let her hear the marriage speak back. It's over, I said. The divorce is filed. The postnup is being enforced. And by the time you land back in Chicago, the only room in this house you'll have a chance of seeing again will be the front hall. You vindictive. No, I cut in. Prepared. Then I ended the call while his parents listened to the silence he had earned. Cole came home 2 days later instead of 3 weeks, angrier than frightened and still arrogant enough to mistake urgency for power. He landed at Midway shortly after noon because the return routing he could cobble together after the charter fiasco was less glamorous than the outbound fantasy. Mara texted me live updates from the terminal, no checked luggage, wrinkled linen blazer, carrying his own bag, visibly arguing with Sloane near curbside while she refused to get into the same car. 15 minutes later, Elisa's process server delivered the petition packet at the black SUV Cole had finally managed to arrange with his remaining personal card. I did not witness the service in person, but I watched the security footage later. He opened the envelope, recognized Elisa's name, and actually looked around as if outrage might summon a different reality. Back at the townhouse, I had already changed the alarm codes, inventoried the contents of the dressing room, and moved his personal effects to the 3rd-floor guest suite under advice of counsel. Occupancy matters can become petty theater if you let them. I prefer clean lines. His suits were zipped. His watches were catalogued. His cufflinks sat in velvet trays like detained little trophies. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and roses from the arrangement my assistant had replaced in the foyer that morning. If ruin was coming, I wanted it to walk into order. Lorraine spent the entire morning pacing. She had cycled through grief, fury, denial, prayer, and strategic revision. By 11 she had settled on the family line that women like her have used for generations when their sons disgrace themselves. Yes, what he did was wrong, but does it really need to become public? Translation: can we preserve status even if we cannot preserve truth? Harold was worse. He had drunk 2 bourbons before lunch and kept muttering that business was complicated and people don't understand male pressure. I almost thanked him for phrasing patriarchy so efficiently. At 1:20, the front security panel chimed. Cole. I was in the library in a navy silk blouse and cream trousers, working through a memo as if the day had not arranged itself around collision. I told security to admit him to the vestibule only. Then I walked to the hall and opened the inner door myself. He looked terrible. Not disheveled enough to lose his beauty, unfortunately, but frayed in the expensive places. Stubble where there should have been a shave. Bloodshot eyes. A mouth trained for charm but currently dragged thin by panic. He held the petition packet in one hand, crushed at the corners. Are you out of your mind? He demanded. No, I said. Just finished being in yours. He tried to step inside. I didn't move. The threshold suddenly looked instructive. Adrian, enough. This has gone too far. It reached too far when you stole $318,000 through shell payments to your mistress. His face changed. There is nothing like watching a liar realize the search warrant is already inside the house. You don't know what you're talking about. I know the LLC names. I know the transfer dates. I know the charter routing. I know the villa invoice. I know the jewelry purchases. I know the condo lease in Tribeca. What I don't know is whether you're stupid enough to lie to me again while standing in my doorway. He lowered his voice, the way manipulative men do when they are trying to convert rage into intimacy. Please. Let me come in and explain. Behind me, from the foot of the staircase, Lorraine made a small strangled sound. She wanted reunion. She wanted maternal restoration. She wanted the scene where her son entered his home and authority rearranged itself around him. Instead, he remained outside. You can explain to your attorney, I said. This is our house. Temporarily, it's the house you no longer have access to. He laughed once, incredulous. You think a postnup is going to save you? No, I said. Evidence is. That was when he noticed the 2 bankers' boxes stacked against the hall wall, each labeled L. Shaw in neat black marker. What is that? Your mother's things. Harold's are in the mudroom. Lorraine gasped. Adrian. I turned slightly without taking my eyes off Cole. Your mother has 48 hours to relocate. You can find somewhere together. Perhaps somewhere soft and feminine. He flinched. Good. Let him hear his mistress's vocabulary and mine. His temper finally tore through the charm. You cold, vindictive bitch. I made mistakes. Men make mistakes. You don't burn down a whole life over this. I smiled, small and tired. You misunderstand the timeline. You burned it down. I'm just controlling the spread. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell stale salt and expensive sunscreen under the airport air. If you do this publicly, you destroy me. I held his gaze. You should have thought of that before funding your side relationship with traceable money. Behind him, through the beveled glass of the vestibule, I could see 2 black sedans at the curb. One belonged to Elise. The other, to a representative from Cole's firm who had requested an urgent meeting after receiving an anonymous packet that morning containing selective but sufficient financial documentation. Anonymous is a flexible term in Chicago. Cole followed my eyes and turned just as Elise stepped out of the first car with her briefcase. He swore under his breath. You set me up. No, I said. I stopped stopping you. Elise reached the vestibule with calm efficiency. Mr. Shaw, counsel for your firm would like to speak with you regarding unreconciled project disbursements. I suggest you take that call before your partners hear from anyone else. The blood drained from his face. This was the difference between private heartbreak and public consequence. One could be denied, reworded, cried over. The other had meeting invites. Cole looked back at me then, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw something that might actually have been fear. Not because I had caught him with another woman. Because I had caught him where it counted to him most. In the structures that carried his name. The following week moved with the strange speed of disasters that have been delayed too long. Once the first beam gives way, the building seems eager to confess its weaknesses all at once. Cole's partners suspended him from active control pending an internal review. The forensic accountant Elise retained shared enough preliminary findings with corporate counsel to turn marital misconduct into governance panic. Expense reports were reopened. Vendor contracts rechecked. Reimbursements once waved through because Cole sounded convincing now looked like what they had always been, hidden indulgence billed as strategic necessity. Sloane disappeared from social media for 3 days. Then she returned with a caption about protecting peace during difficult transitions, which would have been laughable if it had not been so aggressively unserious. Mara confirmed she had vacated the Tribeca condo as soon as the landlord's office received notice that future payments would not clear. She did not accompany Cole back to Chicago. There are women who enjoy being chosen and women who enjoy being financed. Sloane was practical enough to know the difference. Inside the townhouse, Lorraine made one final push to recover the old order. She cornered me in the breakfast room on Wednesday morning while I was reviewing deposition outlines. She wore navy silk and martyrdom. "I know you're hurt," she began, in the tone of a woman preparing to say something unforgivable and hoping syntax will camouflage it, but a wife's duty is not tested by easy years. Men with ambition are tempted. That is simply reality. Smart women learn which humiliations are private and which ones are too expensive to expose. I set my pen down carefully. "Did you practice that before coming in here?" Her lips tightened. "I am trying to save what can still be saved." "No," I said. "You are trying to save what can still be displayed." She stared, stunned enough to forget performance. I continued before she could recover. "Your son did not have one regrettable lapse. He built a parallel life using stolen money and repeated deceit. You are not asking me for grace. You are asking me to donate my self-respect to your family brand." "Brand?" she snapped. "This is marriage. Not as he practiced it." She began to cry then, but angrily, the way some people use tears as accusation. "If you throw us out, where are we supposed to go?" That was the first practical question she had asked in a week, and it revealed more than all her speeches. She had assumed access to my resources was continuous. Not because she loved me. Because she considered my competence a utility. "There's a suite reserved for you at the Langford through Friday," I said. "After that, your son can arrange something else." Her crying stopped immediately. "You booked us a hotel?" "Yes." "You expect us to go to a hotel like transients?" I looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. "No. I expect you to go to a hotel like adults." Harold announced from the doorway that he would not be evicted by a woman into commercial lodging. I almost congratulated him on inventing a sentence no decent man would ever need to say. They left Thursday afternoon with the help of 2 movers and an escalating sense of insult. Lorraine tried one last time on the front steps, hand pressed dramatically to her chest. "One day," she said, "you will regret how merciless you've been." I thought of the IVF appointment Cole had skipped to meet Monica in Aspen. I thought of Brielle's coral lipstick. I thought of Sloane's bronzed wrist wearing a new bracelet while my husband told me he was crossing time zones for our future. I thought of the $318,000 siphoned through lies. "No," I said. "What I regret is how much mercy I wasted before it had standards." She looked at me as if I had slapped her. Then she got into the sedan and left. That evening the house was finally quiet. No cable news shouting. No requests for low-sodium soup. No scented cloud of Lorraine's face cream floating down the hall. I walked room to room barefoot, turning off lamps, touching surfaces, reclaiming silence the way some women reclaim jewelry after a separation. I had forgotten how light a home can feel when it is no longer being occupied by people who resent the person maintaining it. Cole, meanwhile, began his apology tour. Flowers arrived first. I sent them to Northwestern Memorial's oncology floor. Then voicemails, each one calibrated to a different theory of me. The nostalgic version, reminding me of our wedding snow. The practical version, warning me divorce would become ugly and expensive. The wounded child version, saying he was unraveling and I was the only person who had ever truly known him. Finally, the spiritual version, claiming this was his chance to become the man I had always deserved if only I would stop punishing him before he could prove it. I saved every message and forwarded them to Elise. At the temporary orders hearing, Cole wore a navy suit and an expression of disciplined sorrow that might have charmed someone meeting him fresh. The judge was not fresh. Neither was I. His counsel tried to frame the affair as regrettable but irrelevant to the financial questions, a strategy that died the moment Elise presented transaction summaries, shell company links, and proof that marital and business funds had been rerouted for personal concealment. The judge granted my occupancy request, continued the restraints, and ordered expanded disclosure. Cole's jaw tightened only once, but I saw it. On the courthouse steps afterward, he caught up with me before the car door closed. "You didn't have to enjoy this," he said quietly. The autumn wind lifted a strand of hair against my cheek. I tucked it back and studied him. For years I had mistaken his vulnerability for depth. It was not depth. It was appetite wearing injury when appetite lost. "I don't enjoy it," I said. "I respect it." He frowned. "Respect what?" "The bill," I said. "That's all this is now. A bill coming due." Then I got into the car and left him standing under the gray Chicago sky with cameras across the street pretending not to recognize a man whose name had recently appeared on the wrong kind of internal memo. When people tell stories about revenge, they focus on the dramatic strike. In truth, the most satisfying part is often quieter than that. It is watching a man realize that consequences are not cruelty. They are simply the end of his discount. By December, the case had stopped being a marital scandal and become a full collapse of credibility. Cole's firm announced his resignation to address personal matters, which is corporate language for "we would like this smoke to drift somewhere else." 2 investors paused participation in the Wilcox portfolio. A regional business journal ran a vague item about internal review of discretionary spending controls. No one printed the whole truth, but in cities like ours they never need to. Reputations are not destroyed by headlines alone. They are destroyed by private certainty circulating through public politeness. Cole moved twice in 6 weeks. First into a furnished rental in Streeterville so overdesigned it looked like a hotel lobby trying to flirt. Then out of it when his cash flow constricted and support from family became less ceremonial and more exhausted. Harold called me once, not to apologize, but to ask whether I would reconsider for everyone's sake. I let the call go to voicemail and did not return it. Discovery produced exactly what I had expected and one thing I had not. The expected part was ugliness in spreadsheet form: gifts, travel, lease payments, restaurant tabs, transfers routed through Mercer Social LLC, reimbursements disguised as consultant expenses, jewelry written off as client cultivation. The unexpected part was that Monica, the second affair, had received money too. Not as much as Sloane. Enough to prove what I already understood. The women changed. The method did not. When Elise told me, I did not feel fresh injury. I felt release. Patterns, once fully illuminated, stop asking to be interpreted. They simply are. The divorce settled in March, 2 weeks before trial, because Cole finally encountered the limit of performance. Numbers would testify where charm could not. Under the terms, I retained the townhouse pending sale at a valuation favorable to my equity claims, recovered a substantial portion of the dissipated marital funds, and received an additional distribution under the postnuptial fidelity clause. His side conceded fees. Elise sent the finalized term sheet with a single-line email: "This is what being patient bought you." I printed that message and tucked it into my desk. The day we signed, Cole asked to speak privately in one of the conference rooms. Elise gave me a look that said only if you want to. I wanted to, not because I still cared what he said, but because endings interest me when the performance finally runs out. He stood by the window overlooking Wacker Drive, thinner than before, his expensive suit slightly loose in the shoulders. He looked older in a way stress does not always explain. More porous. Less certain the room would cooperate. I did love you, he said as soon as the door shut. I set my bag on the table and took the chair opposite him. I believe you loved what I made possible. That's not fair. I almost smiled. Fairness has become a surprising concern of yours. He sat down slowly. I know I sound pathetic. I know there's nothing I can say that doesn't sound calculated. But somewhere along the line I started thinking forgiveness was permanent. Like if you survived something once, you'd survive it again. I thought I could always get back to you. There it was. The real confession. Not that he cheated. Not that he lied. That he believed my capacity to absorb harm was an asset on his balance sheet. You never got back to me, I said. You just circled what you thought would still be there. His eyes reddened. Maybe genuine, maybe not. By then it no longer mattered. I've lost everything. I looked at him quietly for a moment. No. You lost access to things you didn't value while you had them. That's different. He covered his mouth with one hand and nodded like a man receiving last rites from a language he once mocked. When I stood to leave, he said my name one final time. Not dramatically. Not persuasively. Just softly, as if even then some part of him hoped softness might reopen a door. I turned back. I forgave the first time because I was grieving, I said. I forgave the second time because I was strategic. By the third, forgiveness was no longer the lesson you were owed. Consequences were. Then I walked out. I sold the townhouse that summer. Not because I had to, but because victory deserves fresh air. I bought a smaller limestone row house in Boston, where the windows overlooked a quiet garden square and no room remembered the sound of Lorraine's complaints or Cole's late-night lies. I accepted an offer to become general counsel for a healthcare foundation expanding its national compliance work, which meant my days were full, difficult, and blessedly honest. My mother's blood pressure improved. I slept without checking anyone's face-down phone on the nightstand. A year later, I had dinner with a widowed architect named Daniel who listened more than he performed, asked clear questions, and never once confused vulnerability with license. Nothing rushed. Nothing dazzled. That, I discovered, was its own form of luxury. As for Cole, news traveled in fragments, which was all he had left. Sloan moved on to a venture capitalist in Miami. Monica remarried. Harold's health forced a downsizing Lorraine had spent her life sneering at. Cole did consulting for smaller developers and once, according to a mutual acquaintance, tried to describe his divorce as a brutal overreaction. The acquaintance, a woman, did not let him finish. On the anniversary of the day I watched him drive away for Singapore without ever intending to reach it, I opened the drawer where I kept the old folio. Third time still stared back at me from the tab. I could have thrown it away, but I didn't. Not because I needed the evidence anymore. Because it reminded me of the exact hour my life stopped being organized around surviving betrayal and started being organized around refusing it. He cheated. I forgave. He did it again. And the third time I was already 3 steps ahead. That was not cruelty. That was self-respect arriving at last with paperwork, timing, and the courage to bill every liar in full.